elitist about that. There's an elitist situation that's in you guys' heads, writers.
Well, no, I mean, in some cases, I mean, the reason I feel like I want to do the book group the way that I do it is because I think there are lots of forums for real life scholars to get together and talk to each other. Right. And to a large extent, to me, they're having really a private conversation, because only each other can understand what the hell they're talking about.
Right. I get you.
Yeah, and it's not that they're talking about anything so deep or so, incomprehensible, but the words that they're using are making it incomprehensible. Exactly. And so I like to have conversations that, are done on a level for regular people, average people, to talk about big ideas, right, but in a way that we can understand. Because we're the ones raising the children, and that's where, when you talk about a change agenda, so much of what's going to happen has to happen at the level of the child. And so if parents can't understand, the ideas, then there's a problem. Yeah. Right. So, but I don't think that Dr. Glaude is so far out there that regular people can't understand what he's talking about. But yeah, there may be some words you have to look up and, and then you know something more. So nothing wrong with that. Hello, Dr. Karen. We're just talking about your kind, the scholars.
PhD.
Yes.
I think you try to get your worth out by your vocabulary or what words you use. Reading the book, Eddie used some stuff that I'm saying, my God, man, there was 100 other words you could have said opposed to the words that you picked.
Oh, you mean in terms of how you structured his sentences or just the particular terms?
A particular term.
Oh, okay. Like what?
Got a few. Hold on there.
He's got a few. Well, I had to look up Manichaean a couple of chapters ago, So, but I'm saying,
Michelle talked me down off the ledge because I was just mad, but I understand sometimes you need that special word just to focus in on a situation, but sometimes I think folks go overboard. That's my personal.
He's a scholar. He's a scholar.
I think folks. There was a preacher that I knew, and he would say PhD mean phenomenally dumb, and that was his spin on it. But I just think sometimes we can, as we were talking before you joined in, this information has to be handed down from generation to generation, and somehow it's got to get to the kids. So it's got to be filtered. It has to be easily understood and be easily passed on. Like a lot of our history is spoken word. And so if Eddie got up there and just started talking, my God, we'd be like, hold on, let me look that one up, Ed.
Well, that's why it takes all of us,
It takes a village. It takes a village.
It takes a village.
That's an interesting point that you bring up, because I think about Ibram X. Kendi and how he wrote a book about the history of racism. And then he wrote another book, How to Be Anti-Racist. And then he wrote 2 children's books, So then you take the same idea and then you put it on a level for kids to understand, like anti-racist baby And you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
that's probably
And
what
that's how we have to do it.
Uh-huh.
All right.
Yeah.
I guess we're ready to start.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, who's doing the welcome?
I'll do it just for consistency. Yeah. Hello.
All right.
This is Reading for Change. The book we're reading is Begin Again by Eddie Glaude. My name is Leon Salter from Blackwood, New Jersey, and the price of admission in this group is this book. Welcome.
Welcome, and I have my ticket. The price of the ticket to get in this group. My name's Michelle Odom, calling in from Brooklyn, New York, where I'm proud to say the library system here has decided to make its online catalog available nationally so that people can access books that are being banned in other parts of the country, because that's how we do it in Brooklyn.
Okay.
All right, very good.
Very good.
I'm Karen Johnson in Salt Lake City, and this is my book.
All right. Oh, Karen, I did want to ask you, how many pages are in your book?
Let's see. Well, including the index, it's 250. Oh, 239.
Okay, my book ends at 252. So I think what I'm going to do is just scan in and send it to you, because we go up to 252. So it's got the conclusion, it's got his acknowledgments, it's got his book group questions that I know you didn't have. It has what I guess are really end notes, but he does them in a very sort of non-traditional way, where it's a narrative. So it makes them a little bit more interesting. So I'll scan that and send that to you soon.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And so, so you're anticipating May 8th as the last class session?
Yeah. Since we canceled the Easter.
Yeah, next week. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So who wants to read the summary? Y'all want me to read?
Oh, yeah. There you go.
You know what? Each one of us can take. Is it real long?
Yeah, we can all take a part of it.
Yeah.
I'll do it. Y'all make me sick.
I mean, one of us will read a section.
Yeah, will.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll start with the quotes. Ignorance allied with power is the most ferocious enemy justice can have. James Baldwin, No Name in the Street. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. Maya Angelou, quote on the side of the Equal Justice Initiative's Legacy Museum in Montgomery, Alabama. Not everything is lost. Responsibility cannot be lost. It can only be abdicated. If one refuses abdication, one begins again. James Baldwin, just above my head. Try again, fail better. Samuel Beckett, Worsted Hoe. Okay, next section.
Okay, I got it. Begin again. James Baldwin, America and its urgent lessons for our own. by Eddie S. Glaude Jr., Chapter 7, Begin Again. Examine how America's criminal justice system revealed the value gap. The author also observed how memorial to the civil rights movement and the Confederacy revealed the lies in American justice system. Dr. Glaude then takes the reader along as he tours Montgomery, a sort of civil rights trail. He was in town specifically to visit the Legacy Museum and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, developed by Bryan Stevenson and the Equal Justice Initiative, EJI. He saw how the memorial and museum offered no happy ending in the telling of the American story, as well as the impact this truth-telling had on other visitors. He closed the book by pushing forward on Baldwin's legacy of a new Jerusalem. Dr. Glaude offered his own vision and blueprint for a third American founding, leaving responsibility for its creation in our hands. Below are some of the notable messages from this chapter. Do I continue on from here?
No, Karen.
Section 1, America's criminal justice system reveals the value gap. Eddie Glaude Jr. went to Birmingham in 2019 to see the Legacy Museum and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, developed by Bryan Stevenson and the Equal Justice Initiative. Like Baldwin, Stevenson sees truth as necessary in examining America's justice system and the reasons behind the mass incarceration of so many people of color. Baldwin observed the early days of the Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act of 1968, signed by President Johnson, which established the Law Enforcement Assistance Administration and led to an increased militarization of police departments, as well as extremely high incarceration rate. He saw the way in which Black people were being viewed as disposable in the modern economy, as if our lives have no value. Baldwin wrote, "Ignorance aligned with power is the most ferocious enemy justice can have." I do want to say that there's a good point about Black people being disposable, but we have to understand that that's what corporate capitalism does. That's part of the capitalist system, the surplus and the disposable. Anyway.
Right. Yeah, that's a result.
Section 2, memorials to the civil rights movement and the Confederacy reveal the lies in America's justice system. Walking through Birmingham Shuttlesworth International Airport, and as he drove to Montgomery along Highway 65, Glaude's thoughts wandered to civil rights icons and memorials to the Confederacy and war on terror. He considered how both James Baldwin and Bryan Stevenson understood these opposing symbols as evidence of the lies in America's justice system, and how little is done to hold white men to account for crimes against Black people. Glaude also thought about the way in which the more things change, the more they stay the same, as French writer Jean-Baptiste Alphonse Karr once said.
Okay, section 3, Glaude tours Montgomery. Eddie Glaude toured well-known civil rights landmarks in Montgomery, Alabama, state capital, to kill time before entering EJI Legacy Museum. These included Dexter Street Baptist Church, where King pastored and the bus boycott was planned, Rosa Parks Museum, and other sites along Coosa Street. He thought of historical events taking place here, as well as figures who lived and worked in this city, from Jefferson Davis and George Wallace to Martin Luther King Jr.
Section 4, no happy endings. Moving through the Legacy Museum, Dr. Glaude observed relics of slavery, segregation, lynching, and mass incarceration, witnessed the emotional reactions of other visitors to what they were viewing and realized this focus on violence offered an opportunity to look unflinchingly at what we've done. EJI's Legacy Museum tells a different story of America, one where there are no happy endings.
Section 5, Glaude tours the lynching memorial. Glaude toured the intensely moving lynching memorial about a mile south of the museum, with architecture inspired by the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin and the Apartheid Museum in Johannesburg. At times, the professor was overcome with grief and stunned by a view of lynchings occurring in Jackson County, Mississippi, where he was raised. He realized EJI was doing some of the work Baldwin saw as necessary in the after times.
Section 6, A New Jerusalem, Baldwin's legacy to begin again. Baldwin recognized in his own aftertimes that early appeals to love and interconnectedness had fallen on deaf ears. Now there was an urgent need to understand how the process of becoming white had damaged the American soul, and to begin again reimagining what we want the country to be, a new Jerusalem. Not everything is lost, wrote Baldwin in his last novel, Just Above My Head. Responsibility cannot be lost. It can only be abdicated. If one refuses abdication, one begins again.
Section 7, Blueprint for a Third American Founding. Glaude concludes this book by offering his vision of a third American founding, a new Jerusalem, on the order of following through on James Baldwin's legacy. In Glaude's view, we are each responsible for doing the work of 1, telling our own story, 2, ridding ourselves of the belief that white people matter more than others and confronting our national trauma. But I'm thinking about Biden right now and the Ukraine refugees. Anyway, and 3, rejecting the way we have conducted politics up to the present.
All right, that's fun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Question to the group: has anyone been to the Legacy Museum or the National Memorial for Peace and Justice?
No.
Okay.
I have not.
Yeah,
I've heard about it, but I haven't been down there. I don't know many people who have, at least around in my circles. One of the things I took away from this particular chapter and parts of it was when Glaude was saying that Baldwin realized that we can't try to be white. I think in the mid 60s, the early 70s, I think the majority of Black scholars or Black leadership, we can call it that, was trying for us to assimilate into the larger society, the larger culture, the white culture. And I'm thinking that in itself didn't heal the trauma. And the larger group didn't want us to assimilate at all. It's like, no, you can't be white. You can't have the privilege that we have. And I think, as he was saying, we have to all tell our own story, or at least, I don't mean we have to get at a pulpit and tell our story, but we have to be conscious of the stories that we all have. I think, any Black person in America has a story. It doesn't have to be a life or death story, but I definitely think there's been an encounter with law enforcement, some authority figure, and the reason and the outcome of that had almost all to do with the color of your skin. you know, and then that's how we have this group trauma experience. You know how sometimes you're in an area and there's another Black person, you just kind of give them the nod. I think that nod is the acknowledgement of the trauma. And thank God that you're here, that you got through, you know, you got by. So that was some of the takeaway from me. Even the quote about Maya Angelou, because you're going to begin again if you don't understand.
Yeah, I remember when I was in college, there was a teacher who talked about it's really impossible for Black people to assimilate, even if we want to, that we can acculturate. We can take on the culture and values of white America if that's for some, as Vanita would say, for some ungodly reason, if that's what we want to do. But we can't assimilate because of the color of our skin. So we can change how we perceive ourselves if we want to think of ourselves as white, but it doesn't change what other people see when they look at us. And one of the things that I posted today, I think, was in early February. So last year, HR 40, the reparations bill, started introduced in Congress in 1989, 32 years ago, by Representative John Conyers, who is now dead. That bill has been introduced every year in Congress since 1989. So last year in 2021, it, for the first time in history, moved from the Judiciary Committee. It passed the Judiciary Committee and is now eligible to be voted on by the full House. So in February of this year, 2022, 350 organizations and a bunch of individuals were advocating, were pushing Congress to go ahead and have the full vote on the House floor. I was looking at the list of 350 organizations, and there were a lot of Asian groups on there. There were a lot of Hispanic groups on there, various peoples of color. And I was just thinking, because they also understand that you can acculturate, but you can't assimilate. And so Europeans that have come to this country, they get to pay the price of the ticket and become white. Everybody else, doesn't even have that option.
What do you think?
Wait a minute. I'm jumping here because I want to correct the record with regards to, because you made a statement about where there's a history of us trying to assimilate. We have to understand that history was, we were consistently fighting our oppression, from slavery, the Reconstructed, post-Reconstruction, to the Jim Crow, where Black people were literally in an apartheid system, right? We're paying our taxes for public facilities, but left with inferior resources. Black kids attending segregated schools, getting the handouts. And so the struggle was, we want to assimilate. The struggle was about dismantling the structures, the unequal structures that contribute to our dehumanization and our oppression. That was the fight. Even fighting to sit in restaurants, public restaurants are going to, our tax dollars, our people's tax dollars was supporting a system was going to a system in which our people could not get the benefits from. So it was about destroying those structures, dismantling those structures, and speaking to the importance of our dignity and our humanity, and being if we're paying our tax dollars, then we need to be in this system and not discriminated against, be it in public schools, public universities, public parks, beaches, etc. But at the same time, you see a history of Black folks building their own businesses because of discrimination in Black communities, in Atlanta on Auburn Street, in New Orleans on Dryas Street, etc. Wherever we were building our buildings, we were building our communities, our businesses, etc. So it was not because we want to assimilate, it was about destroying those structures that contribute to our oppression in structural ways. And so I think that's important to understand, because I think that when Malcolm X, there were some things that he would say that were not necessarily, it was rhetoric, but it was not necessarily spoke to the truth of our social. He spoke truth about our social conditions, but it was not about, oh, we want to sit next to white folks, or we want to just go to school with white folks. It wasn't about that. Mm-hmm. It was destroying those entities and also letting this country know that you need to live up to your democratic creed. And so that's our history. From David Walker challenging the Constitution, saying we're supposed to be this, but yet you building a system, an economics, political system off of the enslavement of folks. It was always us challenging these structures of oppression.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, that's true, and that's true, and I absolutely agree. But for me, I think it's a little bit more complicated than that, Karen, because at the same time that we were absolutely fighting those discriminatory structures, we've also had a level of self-hate going on. We've also had struggles with our own sense of beauty, all of which has been imposed on us, by the dominant system.
I'm talking about structural systems. There's a difference between the individual level and structural levels. Okay.
Yeah.
So we as a community may, engage in colorism. But colorism on a structural level doesn't allow your child to go to a public school that has the resources that will allow him, her, or them to have equitable educational experiences.
Right. I agree. And I think it was a combination of what I mentioned, Michelle, and yourself, Doc, in regards to this system, and that you can even identify that as a system, because I think there was a lot more Blacks using the paper bag thing than whites in regards to skin color. And as Michelle, there was a whole thing about a self-hate kind of thing. And then once we sprinkled more of the mass incarceration into this, we were just overwhelmed or just crumbled under the weight of it. Were any of you ladies familiar with the LEAA, the Law Enforcement Assistance Administration? That was, when I read it here, that was the first time I really heard anything about it. So I think it probably came around out of Nixon, but I don't know much about it. But no, from what I read about it and what I kind of Googled, this thing was the doorway to just marching Black men and women into jail.
Right. Didn't that come under the Reagan, Nixon?
I think it started with Nixon.
Yeah. And I had heard of it, but I didn't and don't know a lot about it. But what I knew was, that there had been an active decision to militarize the local police departments, and there's a graphic. I'm going to see if I can pull it up for you guys. There's a graphic that I think depicts well the change in policing over the decades. And, so I still have not read the legislation, and so I couldn't have told you what the enabling legislation was, and that's what it was. But yeah, there's definitely been, a move toward more militarized police departments and increase. I mean, America has more people in prison,
anybody.
Than anybody.
Yeah, than anybody.
Than anybody. That doesn't, happen by accident.
Right.
These are policy choices.
Right.
So
now,
yeah.
Another thing, when this tough on crime thing has always been like tough on crime, but that was the dog whistle for we're going to lock these Black and brown bodies up. You're not talking about the organized between us. Let's call it the mob, the mafia. They weren't talking about those guys. They'll let those guys walk in and walk out of jail very dignified, suit and tie. Sometime if you watch Gotti, he walked in and out with suit and tie. You didn't see them knowing what Gotti didn't see them kicking his door. But it was a different perspective when it came to Black and brown bodies. There was a documentary done about the Los Angeles Police Department, one of the most corrupt and racist police department as we speak today, and how they would conduct a raid at a Black house. I mean, they would destroy it. You couldn't go back in there looking, and then on the document it would say they're looking for paper or looking for drugs. But why do you break the toilet? Why, you just bust up the toilet? What sense did it make? And nobody ever, they took some guys in on vandalism. And this house was destroyed and they got off. So I think we had came through, like Mrs. Shell's thing here, Officer Barney Fife, shirt and tie, the hat and stuff, to Officer Rambo, who's got body armor on, a helmet, and for lack of a better expression, kicking ass and taking names later. That was the biggest downfall for the Black Panthers was the police department, because they started just systematically going in, tearing up. You didn't have enough resources to replace what they busted up.
Except, I don't know if Black America has ever experienced Barney Fife. I mean, we had the overseers on the plantation and the slave catchers, and then coming out of that, you had the KKK kind of picking up from where they left off. So there really should be another graphic of showing what our relationship to the
our
justice
relationship has been from this soldier the whole time, because I mean, just the mere mention of a Black man with a gun, don't have to be there, will get you killed. Just the mere mention of it will get you killed. I mean, a man, woman, or child, they don't care. Or no, that's what they've been trained. It's not that they don't care. That's what they've been trained. So we don't have Second Amendment rights. We just don't have it. If we march down this, walk down the street with rifles or something on our arm, we can have all the NRA card in our pocket that we need the plaster house, but we will be
and nothing to me is a better example than January 6th versus the treatment of Black Lives Matter.
Right. Just show up. I mean, the police took a horrendous.
I mean, they went into Congress and shit on the wall, literally.
And nothing,
and they live to talk about. They live to brag about it.
They walked away. They had no consequences at that moment. Somebody's walking out Congress with the podium from Pulaski's office, and the police are there. You know what I mean? How many Black men and women have been shot on sight, have a cell phone in their hand or nothing? This guy in Michigan, he got shot in the back of the head. In the back of the head. Philando Castro, that's the saddest story I ever heard of my damn life. They told him, I got a gun. So now I'm going to pull the gun on you?
Right.
It doesn't make sense. And I guess at this point, the lie is to believe the lie. And
it's the same thing. It's the same thing that Karen was saying about paying our tax dollars,
right,
and not getting the service that we're paying for.
Right.
You know, we're paying our tax dollars to be killed by the people who are supposedly there to protect us.
Right. And we are expected to do more with less. You know, that narrative, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And Eddie talked about that. And you look over there, I got no boots on. What the hell you expect me to do? I mean, this is, you know, in Camden next week, they're having an expungement clinic. So Rutgers Law School is doing an expungement clinic, and it's a process. So what they're saying is, okay, you come in, we'll provide mailing information and stuff like that, because it's going to be a correspondence back and forth between the person trying to get their stuff expunged and the state. Mm-hmm. And they're offering this. And, you know, and literally, from what a friend of mine told me, who's an attorney, says, we've got to tell the police, don't come over here effing with us, because we're going to be bringing these guys and women in. And, you know, they see, you know, oh, that's Leon. Oh, we locked him up too. What's he doing? You know, just my presence, my Black body presence creates attention for the law enforcement. And when I was talking to my lawyer friend, he says, this is something, if we're trying to talk to our people, our clients, we've got to let the police know. I mean, because it's a lock up on site kind of thing. You don't have to have done anything, outstanding warrants. It's just because you've been in the system, nobody seems to care about you. Mm-hmm. And that's a sad commentary. And I go back to my early statement, to believe the lie is the lie. To believe that all men are created equal without a fight, that's the lie, in my mind.
Yeah. Another thing that I posted, well, two things really. That Eddie had mentioned the EJI's, Bryan Stevenson's video documentary, True Justice. Mm-hmm. So I posted that. It's available on YouTube. It's extremely moving. It at one point really brought me to tears.
I looked at a little bit of what you post, and yeah, you got to be in the right frame of mind to watch it in order to not become extremely angry, not to become extremely tearful. I mean, it's, you know, I can watch maybe 5-10 minutes and I got to stop. Then I'll come back. I haven't seen it all the way through yet. So
but it's nothing like Goodbye, Uncle Tom. I can promise you that.
Nothing like what?
There's a movie from the 60s called Goodbye, Uncle Tom.
Oh.
It is the most graphic, horrific scenes of slavery that I've ever seen. I told Leon, to me, it makes Roots look like child's play. And I wanted him to watch it because I needed to have somebody in the world that I could talk to about this movie. And they're just like, what the scene that sticks in my head the most is, it's a beautiful park. And there's a little girl, a little white girl, all dressed up in a pretty little dress. And she's walking along. and the camera pans down, and it looks like she's walking her dog, but on the end of her leash is a little Black girl. So it's stuff like that in this movie that, to me, if as Leon says, people don't want to read. Well, if you don't want to read and you want a crash course in Black history and how we got to be here, that's the movie. I think
it's a movie or a documentary?
It's a movie. It's called Goodbye. I'll send you a link, but you can find it on YouTube. Goodbye, Uncle Tom. And so, yeah, I forget what I was saying, but how we got here is,
we got here through trauma and violence. That's how we got here. Trauma and violence. And that's what we know. And now to be held at some standard of why are you so violent? Because that's what you gave us. It's not we just picked this out of the sky. That's how we were handled. That's how we were treated. There is
So I was talking about EJI's True Justice documentary, and when you were saying, Leon, that people in prison and nobody cares, and there's a story in that documentary like that where the guy just didn't even believe that there was. What EJI does is it when it's not building museums and legacy memorial, is helps innocent people get out of prison. Right. And so Bryan Stevenson, who is Black, who's also an AME, which I didn't know until I watched the documentary. That's his organization. There's a white-led organization called the Innocence Project. And so I posted a link to they have a series that's currently running on Netflix called The Innocence Files. And they also do the Innocence Files. Yeah. And that's what they also do, is get innocent people out of jail. Because the fact of the matter is, there are a lot of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
There are a lot of them. There are a lot of us that get locked up for little to no reason, and they throw away the fucking key.
Right. Everybody remember the Atlanta child killings. And they're doing a documentary. I don't know sure it's going to come out, but everybody know Wayne, the guy that they locked up, wasn't it. He was a scapegoat. I mean, days after they locked him up and they said we got him, the killings were still going on, but the media had left. So the legal system is beyond broke. I don't think it's broke. It's doing what it was designed to do. It creates a labor force in certain states and counties that they need. It definitely dehumanizes Black people and people of color. I mean, going back to my earlier reference of Barney Fife, there was a town drunk in there, Otis, and he would be just locked up and let go the next day when he sobered up. Indians, American Indian, or indigenous people, no such thing. I mean, these folks were just, and white America introduced alcohol to them. I think they probably did some marijuana or something, but still in all, the alcohol syndrome and the trauma was all introduced from an outside source on those people. And now they're being held accountable for this situation. If I had to summarize the book right now, and I know we got a little more to read of it, the big lie is what are we being told about ourselves and other people of color? That's the big lie. That's the big lie. Every day we look up, Gil Scott has something in regards to, I think, Winning America on that particular CD about, the commercials and the commercialization of all our products and how it, you got to have white teeth, white eyes, white this, it's it works on our psyche after a while. And then, if everything white is right, then everything black is wrong.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where we're at.
So let's look at the big solution. So, Eddie has spent most of the book reviewing the history and how we got here. And, he's not a historian, he's a religious scholar, but he did his thing. And now he gets down to this chapter and he ends it with his basically 3-point prescription for what needs to happen. Telling ourselves, the truth, confronting our trauma, and doing the work of repair. So what did you all think about? And, as I've said to Leon many times, there are a lot of great ideas and blueprints out there for what needs to happen. But saying it and doing it are two different things. So my question is, what did you all think about the prescription? And what did you think?
Well, as far as the prescription is concerned, I think it touches the 3 points that Eddie talks about are valid. And there's 3,000 or 3 million more points that are valid. I think as we talked earlier and over the years, this information has to assimilate from let's call it the learned, these scholars, these PhD guys and women, and work its way down the levels till it gets down to the grassroots people on the streets. What does this mean to a mother, a father, a teenager, a grandparent in regard to their daily problems? How do we get this information so they can now start saying, okay, how can I apply this to their daily problems? And maybe if we can get 1 out of the 3 of Eddie's down and maybe 1 or 2 out of the other ones down, that's enough to create the traction, because you got to get things moving. And one of the truth, I think more than anything, as religious people, I think as religious people or spiritual people, let's use the word spiritual people, we have to understand that we can make this better for ourselves. And one of the things I took away from the book was we can't change white folks. We can't change that, but we can make it better for ourselves. And whatever that is, and what steps we have to do, we have to worry about ourselves. I found it ironic that off the topic a little bit, that Joe Manchin is back in politics, or he's back, can be a clog again. We have to stop letting those things happen. Vote him out, boo him out, whatever we got to do. We got to get this guy out of there and make it better for ourselves. So that's what I took out of that. I think telling the truth to yourself, telling the truth to your kids, being a person, well, here she comes, and he or she's going to tell the truth. And I think that's, in my mind, our first step. We got to tell the truth, recognize the truth.
Dr. Karen?
Yeah, so I think he makes some valid points. Like, for example, I don't know if you all are the same page, but on 202, the second paragraph, where he says, what we need is a third American founding to begin again without the insidious idea of the value gap that continues to get in the way of a new America. We need an America where becoming white is no longer the price of the ticket. Instead, we should set out to imagine the country in the full light of its diversity and with an honest recognition of our sins. As the lynching memorial seeks to do, we have to confront our national trauma honestly if we are to shake loose from the political frame of Reaganism and Trumpism with its racial dog whistles and foghorns, its greed, its selfishness, and its idolized version of America as the shining city on the hill. where the country's sins are transformed into examples of inherent goodness. This will demand of us a new American story, different symbols, robust policies to repair what we've done. And so with that, I think that's fine. That just that example right there is that we do need a reconceptualization of this country where we speak truth about this, where we even speak from and bring in present day with Biden and his crusade against Russia and his being the savior of Ukrainian. At the same time, you know how we saw how Black folks are being whipped at the border and being dispelled, Black and Latinx folks. But I agree with that. We have to start with that, with reimagining a new America that we're, number one, we have to tell the truth of our sins, of the near genocide of indigenous peoples, of the manifest destiny of claiming the lands that was northern Mexico, okay? And then of course, a nation that's not a nation of immigrants. I feel disrespected when I always hear people say that. It's a nation that was stolen from the indigenous people and built off the back blood, sweat, and tears of enslaved people. We have to speak that truth. We have to. And we have to unhook from whiteness and white folks. When those Ukrainians get here, they're not going to see themselves as Ukrainians. They become white.
They're white.
They're in their country. Whiteness doesn't mean anything. They're Ukrainians.
Right.
Not Russians, okay? Right. But when they get here, they become white. They already have a high status, even before they get here. Right. Because we're bringing in 100,000 Americans, U.S. citizens can open up their doors to them, and they get all of the privileges that disenfranchised, marginalized, suppressed people in this country do not get.
Not at all. You're absolutely right.
So that's why I agree with that. We got to speak truth, and we got to begin again in terms of reimagining a much more revolutionary nation than what we have, just from that point.
So I got a question.
So I looked at it. I kind of put on my public administrator's hat, and I was thinking about the quote you reminded us of a few weeks ago, Karen Audre Lorde's quote, "The master's tools will never tear down the master's house," right? And so, and as I said earlier, Eddie Glaude is a religious scholar, not a historian. One of the things, and my master's is in public administration. That's a very generalist kind of field. And it suits my personality because there was never really one subject that I only wanted to study. But as an administrator, the main thing that you learn how to do is to take an idea and bring it into reality. And so Leon and I were talking a few weeks ago about the difference between a business plan and an operational plan. On the public sector side, you're talking about the difference between a vision statement and a program design. And so, if I were writing a grant proposal, for example, to put into practice what Dr. Glaude is talking about, I would look at the 3-point prescription that he gave as the vision. That's where we're headed. That's the overall goal that we're looking for. But then you have to look at the practical steps of what are the things that need to be done, what is the methodology? What are the steps that need to be taken to get us to that place? So if you just take point one, telling our own story, you might want to think about, so how are we going to do that? What are the forums that we're going to create that allow people to tell their own story? There's this great organization called StoryCorps that kind of does that. And so when I think about the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house, it seems to me, because I'm a generalist and not a specialist, that it really takes all of the disciplines, basically all of the disciplines working together, bringing their particular expertise, their particular insight and knowledge to bear on what is an extremely complex problem. That's why I get frustrated, Leon, with the blueprints, because to me, that's the easy part. That's the easy part, to say, this is where we want to go. The devil is in the details. Yes. How do you get there?
Yes. Got a question. In both of your answers, it was obvious that we got to tell the truth and we got to do something. Now, we have, as a country, these documents, Declaration of Independence, we got the Constitution, we got all these documents that kind of tell us how we want this nation or this union to operate. Could this change could this change happen with the documentation that we have now in regards to, because what it meant and what it says might be two different things. All men are created equal. When you didn't look at Black people as even people, so were we in that document? Or were women in that document? And indigenous people in those documents? Can we, without completely breaking the mold, pick up and move on? Because,
right. Well, that's what's been done, in the form of amendments to the Constitution. But, when I think about Dr. Glaude talking about a third American founding, then it occurs to me that one of the how-to steps might be the creation of a brand new Constitution based on who and where we are today.
Right. I agree, but that was my question. Can we, and then just like the Colin Kaepernick situation, they spent that when he was talking about police brutality, and everybody should have got behind that. Oh, he's disrespecting the flag, and so I think we all are conscious enough to understand white folks ain't going away easy, or white folks ain't going to share, or it's just not going to happen without some pushback. Because if the roles were reversed,
right, but I want to discourage you from focusing on what's not going to happen, and and think about what's happening with the reparations bill that I talked about earlier. Right now, that John Conyers introduced 32 years ago in Congress. It got its first pass through the Judiciary Committee after 32 years. And if you look at 40 Acres and a Mule,
right,
going back to 1865, Black folks have been talking about reparations for a long, long time. And if you think about what I say to y'all all the time about a 500-year plan, right, that is the pace at which change occurs. Is it fucked up? Yeah. Is it hard? But does that mean it's not happening? Does that mean that we should not keep pushing forward? Because, as I said to you, Leon, white folks have themselves in a fix. they've taken the world to the point where they've effectively destroyed the earth. They've gotten themselves in a situation where they can't even allow democracy to flourish for all the fear they have about sharing the planet with other people. So this situation cannot go on indefinitely.
Right. Most definitely. Yeah, most definitely.
They're going to be changed. They're going to be changed whether we like it or not.
Yes,
so
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Do you think the fear is not that their fear to share, is who they have to share with?
Yeah. Holding on to power,
Yeah, but I think they're willing to share with Ukrainians, Swedes, certain Germans, but now you got the Chinese out there. You got Africa out there. You got African Americans. You have a lot of people of color now, which is the dominant group in the world, not white.
Right. And so Europe, Western, you mentioned nations, the global South is the appropriate term, that Europe had colonized. And it's it's about holding on to white supremacy,
holding on to power.
It's about holding on to Russia was always problematic. Remember, I talked about how Russia was never a part of that history of colonization. It was the other Western nations that were.
Right.
And that's why NATO was problematic, because it's bringing more and more of these Eastern European nations into NATO to be part of this white power structure. And China threatens that.
Right.
African nations threaten that, particularly if they forge relationships with China and Russia, right?
And Russia.
It threatens that. So it's about holding on to this white power structure to, have power on the planet. And then the other thing that complicates this is that these billionaires, these white male billionaires, make this situation even more so complicated because of their influences. They could bypass governments now.
Right. We see that every day. Yeah.
Social media and forms of communication that influence our thinking. Right. That becomes a part of the hegemony. And hegemony means the dominant power structure that tells you this narrative of what this is supposed to be about. Right?
Yeah, look at that nasty Elon Musk, who apparently had agreed with the United Nations that he was going to put in, I think, $40 billion or something to address the hunger issue. And he had agreed to do it. And then he said, you know what, I'm just going to buy Twitter. F y'all.
Right. And I'm going to buy this company. About the same amount of money that he was going to put into fight hunger.
Solving a social problem. Right.
Right. And that's about profit and control and power. This one man has the power to control how people think and what they say on a global level. That's power.
Right. You're right. And we've all in different ways mentioned that white America or whiteness will not give up power without a fight. I mean, and that's the truth about it. But as Michelle said, don't give up the fight, don't get discouraged, but continue in our own areas, in our own situations to tell the truth, live by the truth, and look for the truth, and to spread the truth. Then that's the hope that we have to have, and the resolve that we have to have in order to say, okay, here's my 500-year plan. So I'm going to tell the truth now, and that will live forever.
Not this reparations. John Conyers introduced that bill in 1989. The man is dead.
Yeah.
The bill continues on. Sheila Jackson Lee took the baton and she's running with it.
Right.
That's what we got to do.
That's what we got to do. And so Sheila Jackson Lee, in my opinion, she was told the truth, or she believed in the truth. That's why she had the strength and the wherewithal to pick up the bill and say, I'm going to do something with this. And if it wasn't nothing else but pass it on to the next person, she had the will and the understanding of the truth. She did not get sidetracked, and she did not get discouraged. And then we go.
She did not come along and say, it's all about me. I have to come up with the perfect idea. I have to reinvent the wheel. John Conyers invented the wheel.
Right. And just run with it now.
Let's move that wheel forward. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. Very good.
We are past time.
But it was stimulating.
So this actually was the last chapter.
We're gonna do the conclusion.
We'll do the conclusion next week. I'm gonna send all of those pages to Karen.
Oh, thank you.
Page.
I do have a conclusion page.
You have the conclusion, okay.
Right.
And you have the index.
And I have the index. I just don't have the question.
Okay.
And something else you said he did.
Author notes.
Yeah, it's like it's
I have the author notes. I have the author notes.
You do have the author notes? Okay.
Yeah,
okay. Then I
index.
You got the acknowledgement?
Okay. Let me see. I have the acknowledgements. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, it sounds like
that looks like she's got it all, Michelle.
It looks like, but you said you end on page 239.
And that's index.
We end on page 252. And
right. I don't know what this last piece.
The excerpt from Democracy in Black, do you have that?
What page is that on?
245.
Oh no, I don't have that. I just
you have author's notes, acknowledgements, index,
and that's
I sent you the book club guide earlier. So the only thing you don't have is the Democracy in Black excerpt. So I'll send you that.
Okay. All right. So that's just from his previous book?
Yeah, that's an excerpt from his previous book, and the book club guide I sent you earlier. That's just a couple of pages. So that's the only changes to the two editions, I think.
Okay. So we're just going to read the conclusion and in the author's notes.
Yeah, the from A New America, the conclusion, all the way to the end of the book, plus what I sent you.
Oh, okay. All righty. Okay. Thank you.
So y'all have a good week.
So next week,
Mother's Day, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to do something, folks.
What? You're a mother?
Well, I know a few, so I'm gonna have to work some things out.
All right. Well, try to work it out for after 1:30.
Okay, I'll see what I can do there.
All right. Y'all have a good week.
All
Talk
right.
to you soon.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Michelle.
Yes.
Okay. It's Mother's Day.
Okay, let me get back online and just turn this thing completely off. So what happened